Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Recruitment Uncensored with me, Kate O'Neill. As you all know, if you've watched before, all these episodes are about discussing recruitment specific topics, really open and honestly. And I always like to pick topics that are quite big in the recruitment world at the moment, which is why I've picked today's subject. How will AI impact our EDI agenda? Now, this is an area I just want to highlight that I know I need to learn more about. And again, this is one of the reasons I set up the show was not just for me to talk about areas that I'm experienced in, but to get people on that can really add value, not just to you guys watching, but to me as well. I'm really looking forward to today because I know I can learn about both these subjects. So my guest today is Joe Major, who is founder of Diversity in Recruitment. Now, I met Joe, I think it was the Recruitment Expo in London in March for the first time, and went to her talk and was just blown away about her approach to this subject, how she comes across. I just love hearing her speak again at the team conference, heard her speak again, and it was an absolute no-brainer to get her on with me today and talk about this subject because I know that she knows her shit basically, which is why I've got her on. So let's get started because I know we've got a lot to talk about today. This is a really interesting and broad and detailed subject. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Joe, can AI actually support ED&I? Because I know this is something that you've been looking into, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's really important to mention here that there's a couple of things to put out there. I'm not a tech expert. I am not an AI expert. I am a recruitment expert, 23 years in the sector, 17 years on a desk. And I know a ton of stuff about inclusive, accessible and equitable recruitment. I'm now a trainer and I give advice in that area, right? So I'm just pushing that out there. This is a subject that I'm passionately interested in. And I guess my journey into really trying to learn more and more around AI and its relationship with equality, diversity and inclusion was after I watched a couple of documentaries on TV. I think it was during lockdown when we were all like hooked on Netflix. And I watched this really cool documentary, and it was about AI, and it was about I've got the name of it written down somewhere, but I can't even remember where
I was
I've
going to
already
say,
marked
yeah,
it now.
because I'd be quite keen to
But,
watch that
yeah,
actually.
Coded Bias, that's it, Coded Bias, and it was on Netflix, and it was all about AI and its relationship with bias and how that was playing out for human beings, especially those folks who are already marginalized and discriminated against because of their identity, their background and the living circumstances. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was the whole kind of like, the it was based on the fact that we are feeding the machines from already biased human beings, and those machines are learning from bias and prejudice and replicating that at a million miles an hour in ways we cannot even comprehend.
I was going to
And
say it's quite overwhelming when you think
yeah,
about that, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. And ways that the thing about machine learning is that we understand it to a point, but what we don't understand is how it then progresses and continues to make decisions. So, if you look at it in things like in banking and finance decisions, sometimes we program it to look for an applicant and make a decision based on these different factors that we fed in here. And we understand where the machine's learning from, but then we don't know. What we do is we can't then understand on a micro level how that's like impacting its individual decision making. So it becomes really hard for us to kind of like feed back to people as to the reason why they've experienced that outcome. and also to start to unpick some of that stuff once it's been loaded in at the front end. And then there was another one that related specifically to the recruitment industry and recruitment technology, and that was Computer Says No, which is by, I think it was BBC. It's available on iPlayer, and that was fascinating. It was all about how AI is being used in recruitment technology, interviewing technology, facial recognition, anything that that involves automating the recruitment process. And again, it was looking at things like how it racially profiles some candidates, how it can create really challenging barriers for people who are neurodivergent, how it can misinterpret things like body language, tone of voice, accent, things like that, and really that what the real life implications are for large populations. And it looks at various kind of case studies. It looks at some pretty significant case studies. Like how things are playing out, especially in the judicial system in the States. Amazon, how they realized back in 2015 that because they'd programmed the AI, the machine learning, to look at candidates over the last 10 years, because they'd been majority male, their own recruitment process was favouring applications from men and not women.
Yeah.
And that, I guess that's what prompted the interest in it. I was like, crikey, that this conversation's getting louder and louder. I'm hearing more and more tech companies talk about AI and selling this stuff into the recruitment industry, and I'm like, is anyone actually talking about the impact this can have on ED&I? And I wasn't hearing a lot about it, so I thought, right, I need to get involved in this and have a conversation as somebody who could be impacted by it.
Yeah, I am gonna watch, especially that Computer Says No, like that. That sounds like, I can't believe there's even a recruitment specific. That's really interesting. But so obviously looking into it and knowing now kind of how it can, with some of them, how it's being programmed. Can you see AI actually supporting ED and I? Obviously, if it's programmed properly, can you see it supporting it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like anything, isn't it? If it's used correctly. I mean, the biggest issue that we have in fair recruitment is human bias and preference. And when we use technology, that takes that out. So anything we can do to mitigate and control human bias and preference, then absolutely, like, kind of sign me up. But the point is if we simply replicate those human recruiter biases, hiring manager biases from the get-go, all it's going to do is replicate, but what it's going to also do is build and evolve and grow and supercharge those bias and preferences, like in my opinion. I think that like automation and AI is definitely not something that we shy away from at all. I think it can complement ED&I. It can free up time for the best bits of recruitment, which is the proper interviewing process, giving feedback to candidates. It can minimize the distractions that we have, but it's we've got to think about what's going in, what's the training, what is it learning from, and let's use this in a way that's going to really benefit us. But there are multiple things that you read up on, and and it kind of like, I was reading a piece around how AI can be used to look into employee turnover and look at the stats and look at that in terms of people's identity, backgrounds and circumstances, and pick out some of the reasons, groups of people that might be leaving roles, and trying to understand the reasons why. It can also be used in things like promotion decisions. again, it's taking out human bias, isn't it? It's taking out
Yeah.
that the subjective feelings that we have around some of the stuff that we do and the decisions we make, and it's purely looking at at things on an objective level. So I definitely think it can support the ED&I agenda, but only if it's used in the right way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And actually that leads me quite nicely on to another question I wanted to cover off with you is, does AI have the potential to set diversity goals back a step? Now, you mentioned just a minute ago, well, if it's programmed with bias already, it's replicating, but then it's going to spiral. So just,
Mm.
I think that's a really important question to cover off, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it definitely there is the potential for it to push back diversity. And I think because I can't hear tech providers talking about how they're mitigating and controlling this, I'm maybe jumping to the conclusion that this is going to be a disaster for the recruitment industry. It might be that I'm not in enough rooms, but I'm listening on a regular basis to people who seem to be leading the conversation in our industry, and they're not talking about representation. They're not talking about mitigating bias. They're not talking about the importance of what goes into the training of AI. The whether it's because they're shying away from it or whether it's just not on their radar because it doesn't impact them. I mean, like I said, I am no expert, and I could shy away from it because there might be people saying, well, what do you know? You're not a tech and AI expert. But I'm pushing for the conversation, and I think others should do. I think we need to get together as an industry and provide some guidance on it. I think we need
And
to
learn about it.
and learn about it together alongside the tech companies. And actually, I was talking about this at a conference recently when we were talking about AI, that I honestly think that we need to get together as an industry and set some guidelines around ethical AI and give recruitment businesses the tools to be able to do their due diligence and ask the right questions when it comes to purchasing technology. Because often we are driven, we're driven by price, and when really we should be looking at other factors, in terms of
Yeah.
how
What's the quality of this tech?
what's the quality, who's behind it, have these things been thought about.
And
So
where have they got the like the data, or how's it been,
yeah.
what's gone into it for it to be set up?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're bringing in and if you're automating a process, and I mean, the language is probably going to be terrible that I use now. It's going to be so basic, but you come in and you drop in your new automation tool, and it needs data. So what does it do? It scrapes your database, right? And it looks for, it might look for patterns and repetition. It might look at, like, for example, it might be a job matching, CV matching, whatever, job adverts, advert generation processing, and it might pick up the certain identity markers and things that it likes, things that tend to be majority, whether that be universities, qualifications, geographical locations, salary requirements, whatever it could be, looking at those majority groups. And it could use that as its benchmark, as its framework, right? So the recruitment in agency said, this is what good looks like. This is who we place. But what happens if it's using that data? This is who we place, so this is all we're going to look for. What happens when that recruitment industry, that recruitment business now has to start looking actually at diversifying its talent pools because their clients are pushing back and saying, we need more representation. What if your AI has been programmed beyond repair to look for majority candidates? It's
Yeah.
going to be screening out people that you need in your talent pools.
And you might not even realize it if you don't
You might
know
not even
that, if
realize
you
it.
don't understand, because I know for me, I am tech savvy, but all this AI stuff, I haven't looked into it that much, so I don't know how it works, right? So if
Mm,
I was to engage with a tech company, if I had an agency, and I don't know to go and ask these questions, how I won't even know where they're getting the data from. So I would think, oh, great, this is going to help my agency become more diverse and inclusive, but it's not, and I don't realize that.
Yeah.
It's just nuts, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, that's why I think guidance is like really, really key. And I think, you know, I don't have all the answers myself, but I know like if we collaborate and the ED&I folk get together with the tech providers and the people that are leading the conversation, and we start to actually look at, you know, what do we need to be thinking about? How can we come together and make this commitment to ethical AI, so people who are already marginalized and discriminated against don't become even more marginalized and discriminated against. And also, we're not pushing back our representation and diversity goals because we
Yeah,
didn't ask the question in the first place, how is the machine learning? Who is training it? What is it looking for? And what that impact could be on the candidates that don't have that.
yeah. No, and just for anyone watching, thanks, Manisha. Manisha shared the Netflix link for what was
Okay.
the Netflix one? Was it Coded Bias?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, she's put it in the chat for anyone that wanted to watch it. Definitely going to watch that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what got me thinking then when you were talking, Joe, was I think what happens as well is ED&I for some agencies, people, whatever, I think they find it quite overwhelming because maybe they don't understand it. They want to bring it into their agency. So they think, oh, I know, we'll use AI or tech because that will solve our problems. And then we don't maybe need, or it doesn't matter if we don't understand it enough because that will help us. But that I just kind of said it then. The scary thing about that then isn't it, that, like I said, they think it's helping,
Yeah.
but actually it could be setting them back a step.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, because what we don't want to do is to go the other way, and we don't want to make assumptions on, you know, for example, we could program, we could tell our AI system but again, I'm trying to find the language, to make sure that it pushes through people that are deemed as being from another race or ethnicity group other than, you know, than white British. How is it going to know that? It could use big data and base that purely on names, and it could make the wrong decision. You know, it could. We've got to make sure that AI isn't supporting positive discrimination, which is where we go headhunting for people purely because of their identity. You know, what we don't want to make sure is that we're not choosing one group over another. We're just making sure we've got everybody in the group with the right skills and experience. You know, and I don't want to see is being able to search candidates based on our interpretation of what their gender identity may be, and our interpretation of what their race and ethnicity may be, and headhunting them purely because of those things, because they are deemed as being underrepresented, or even worse, diverse talent. So, you know, this is all stuff that I guess we've got to think about. And if a recruitment business is relying on AI to be the answer for representation and diversity goals, they've got to rethink, because it's much, much bigger than that, much bigger than that. It's not about just helping our clients hire themselves out of the diversity problems, which is something I say all the time. It's about doing the work first to make sure our recruitment business is accessible, equitable, and inclusive. That is the foundations of our work. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think we've started talking about it, but I think there's something we can go into a bit more detail on. So from what you've looked into already and understand, with the tech companies, are they all thinking about the impact of artificial intelligence on already underrepresented groups? Is this a conversation that any of them are having?
I haven't heard it. I think some of them are okay. I'll rephrase that. I think the rec tech companies who are censoring what they do around mitigating bias and hiring manager and recruiter preference are leading the way on this stuff, right? And they are using AI and technology and automation for good. And there is some good technology out there which has been programmed properly, which actually supports diversity and inclusion, and is underpinned by AI and automation. There are other platforms that that aren't sold as an ED&I product that I think are undermining ED&I. Not intentionally. I just think that there was a missing seat around the table when it was designed, and nobody actually said, hang on a minute, have we thought about the ethical side of what we're doing here? How are we making sure that we are thinking about things like privacy, data control, not discriminating, not replicating and emphasizing and growing and evolving bias, in hiring habits. It's all about, in our design of technology, it's all about who's missing from that design and development stage, right? So, and I don't think there's always that conversation kind of to be had. So I'm not going after the tech companies. I'm just like, if you have thought about this stuff and you are providing guidelines for your clients, please put that in front and center of the conversation. Don't assume that the recruitment industry are not interested in it, because that a lot of them are. If you ever said to a recruitment business owner, do you want to know that, do you want to be confident in the fact that our technology is not discriminating and excluding people? I don't know many people that are going, no, I'm not interested in that. People genuinely care about that stuff, right? Because it impacts so many of us and so many of the people that we care about. So it's like that we're not used to having that conversation with the recruitment industry. So rather than talk about things focused just on cost saving, speed and efficiency, let's also talk about fairness. Let's also talk about equality. We don't have to choose one conversation or the other. We can just have the conversation about everything.
Yeah. And a lot more agencies, like I've noticed in even the last year, I'm seeing it talked about a lot more as part of their initiatives, and it's a focus. But even for the tech companies, I think that maybe are speaking to agencies where visually they're not shouting about it or talking about it, it's probably still worth bringing it up, because it might not be something they've thought about, and it is important for them to think about it.
Rec technology companies using AI can be the thought leaders in this. They can be the ones that are planting that initial seed. There are so many recruitment businesses that aren't thinking about ED&I from a commercial perspective. They're not thinking about how it helps them improve their recruitment ratios, their client services, their efficiency, develop their talent pools, making them more successful, helping them with their recruiter brand and their, and ultimately making them more successful and more commercial. There are still many businesses that still see ED&I as a, this nice to have CSRE thing that we can pop on the shelf and pull out, once a year when it's Pride. I do think there is this opportunity for anybody in this AI space to be also thinking about inclusion and accessibility and mitigating bias, and really starting the conversation and getting clients, the recruitment industry, to start thinking about stuff. There are lots of things we can do when it comes to our due diligence. As a recruitment business, when we're thinking about engaging with a technology product, and I think this movement towards ethical technology should be front and center of what we're doing. As I said, it's not necessarily just about making sure that it doesn't discriminate, but there's all sorts of things that we need to think about when it comes to ethical tech. And also, it's a big part of building candidate trust. People are untrusting of technology because they know how it plays out. They watch the same stuff that I watch. They read the same books that I read, right? Technology can create as many deselection points for candidates as it does, as much as it helps us, and we really need to be aware of the fact that people don't trust it, especially if they're being asked to put their personal data in there.
That's the thing for me is,
Yeah.
and this is as a recruiter and now as a trainer, I've just always got this, oh, but will it do as good a job as me? You know, like, can I actually trust it? And in terms of using it, for example, to, I don't know, interview candidates or screen them, I just think, I don't know if I can trust it. So even if I used it, I'd still sense check it myself anyway. What, like, and that's just me. Maybe because I'm getting older and I'm getting too old school with tech. I don't know. But I just, I just feel sometimes that what you said there is the trust piece is, oh, can I
But if I'm saying
100%
to
trust
you as a
this?
recruitment business, do you know what? Ethical AI and technology and automation is key to us. We do our due diligence. These are the things that we've done to make sure that this is only going to improve our processes and support your application and help you into work. You're showing the evidence, right? You're showing the receipts there. And if you're not talking about it, then perhaps you're missing an opportunity to build that trust piece.
Yeah. Well, in a moment, I'm going to get Joe to share a top tip, which will leave you all something to kind of go away and think about after today's episode. But before I do that, I just wanted to flag the next episode. Obviously, it's going to be in a fortnight's time, 26th of July, exactly the same day and time. It's going to be a Wednesday again, 12:30. My next guest is going to be the wonderful Mike Ames of Flair Consultancy. We are going to be speaking about, and I'm going to have to look at my notes here because I always forget the titles, how to attract and retain top talent, and ultimately from that make more sales within your agency. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting Mike on to speak about that. I'm sure a lot of the watchers, especially the managers, the recruitment owners, directors, founders, this is a really important and big topic for you guys. So Mike is the perfect person to speak about that. So he will be on with me. But yeah, let's go to your top tip, Joe. So we were speaking a little bit about this before we went live, and we've kind of touched on it. Make sure your tech providers are thinking of ethical AI. So how anyone watching that's thinking, okay, great, I know that's the top tip, but how can they, in a nutshell, how could they go about that?
So there's some questions to ask. Everything's about asking questions, being inquisitive, being interested to do your due diligence. Okay, so there's a couple of things. I've written them down. Check that your training data, the data that you're using to train the system, is diverse and representative and isn't just focused around one majority group. And make sure that your historical data is representative. If it only looks one way, that's all you're going to get moving forward. Make sure they provide clear criteria for evaluation, especially if you CV and job matching. Make sure that it's job relevant only, objective stuff, not the subjective stuff. Continually monitor for signs of bias. Make sure that they've got the capacity to help you to do that. So checking for signs of bias, patterns for discrimination against certain groups. Make sure that the AI isn't learning from human recruitment decisions.
That's an important one, I think, isn't it?
Diversity around the table in the design, development, and testing stage. Who was involved? Who's part of your business? Show me their backgrounds. Can they conduct audits? Can they review and update the algorithms and models that have been used by the AI system to make the decisions? And finally, please make sure that you train and educate your recruiters so that they understand the potential for AI and bias. Really, really key that we're having this conversation. And then finally, I would just mention before this book that I'm 3/4 of the way through on audio called Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. Oh my gosh, it blew my mind. It is all around AI and how it impacts the outcomes for human beings. I think whether you're in recruitment, whether you're, any walk of life, this book is eye-opening on the topic of AI.
Yeah, no, so actually, I think not only have anybody watching gained obviously the valuable insights we've discussed, you've got 2 documentaries you can go and watch. I will be watching them. And actually, somebody else shared in the chat, I can't see the user, it just says LinkedIn user, the documentary Maker of Coded Bias's LinkedIn profile. So if you want to go and add that person, you can do. But yeah, 2 documentaries, and you've got a book recommendation. So amazing. But
Yeah, and this is all about
I
making
can't,
your own mind up, right? Making your own mind up, but make sure you've got
yeah,
the information to hand first.
yeah. So I can't believe it's already 1 o'clock. So we've finished for today. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on, because I found this incredibly insightful. There's lots of takeaways. But anyone watching, if you've got more questions, chuck them on the LinkedIn event, contact Joe directly, message her. She is a fountain of knowledge in this area, believe me. Oh, it was Andy from Team that shared the guy's LinkedIn profile. Hi, Andy. But yeah, anybody. Oh, Leah wants to know the second documentary name. We'll check it because we've run out of time.
Yeah.
Leah, don't worry, we will check it in the chat for you and make sure everybody can see it. But thank you so much for watching today, guys. I will see you in a couple of weeks. See you later.
Thank you. See you later.